NASCAR has announced the 2019 rules package for the Cup Series. Cars will have increased downforce, breaking a trend of reduced downforce over recent seasons. They're also going to have reduced horsepower at intermediate tracks through the use of a smaller tapered spacer. And Aero ducts going to be used to create tighter racing on most of the bigger ovals in the series. Long story short, this is about speed and about downforce. Is that fair to say? I mean, as we kind of have a conversation that includes everyone, that everyone can understand, slowing the cars down, downforce is increased as well. Yeah, and to enhance the competition, give everybody a better chance. And NASCAR's put a lot of work, not just NASCAR, but the manufacturers, the teams have all been in this together to make this work. Okay, so we have a couple questions that fans have sent in on social media using the hashtag NASCAR America. Thanks for doing that. We'll get through a couple of them now. Scott wants to know, will this create more or less lanes if racing at the intermediate tracks? DJ, I'll start with you. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see. Now, again, this is going to be a work in progress to know exactly what will happen. But yes, I believe that it's going to increase that to where you're going to see drivers searching around, trying to keep the RPMs up as much as possible. And if that means moving from the bottom to the middle to the top, that's exactly what we'll see. Steve and Jeff, do you agree? I mean, we kind of just have to wait and see here.
Well, I'm going to say yes, more and less, depending on the racetrack. And I think the question is truly a question. And that's what's going to make it so much fun to watch. There will be tracks where the top works because that's where the grip is, and I feel that may go away. Then there are tracks that we only ever see them run at the bottom, and I think we may see them move up the racetrack to keep the RPMs up, like Dale Jarrett said. The truth is, I'm kind of just taking an educated guess because we're going to have to wait and see. And I think it could change from the first race to the second at the same track as teams get better with the package.
Yeah, I think a place like Michigan where we haven't seen the third and fourth lane develop, I think that's a track that we will see it because I think the cars will make enough grip and the speed will be down a little bit enough to make it work where now they're on edge and there's not enough racetrack grip up there. So I think there it will make a bigger groove. But at Atlanta, where we see them running all over the track, I have no idea what's going to happen there.
Here's a good one, DJ. I know you're partial to the Daytona 500, and of course, plate tracks have been a huge topic of the day. So Razor's Edge wants to know, will Talladega and Daytona be slower? I think this is something that a lot of fans are wondering when you mention these two tracks that so many people love. They want things to stay the same to a certain extent. Yeah, certainly the Daytona 500, because the rules aren't changing there. It's going to be what we saw in the past, what we saw this year. But from that point forward, I don't see the speeds being slower. Again, we won't really know until they get there with the entire package, but I don't think that NASCAR's objective is to make the cars any slower there. Steve, Jeff?
Well, all I will say is I have raced my entire life, 20 years in NASCAR, and never have I been to Daytona or Talladega without a restrictor plate, and that's what we're going to see when we go to Talladega in the spring. So I think the fans should come out and pack the place because your guess is as good as mine on what the race is going to be. A ton more horsepower with a big hole. It's like drafting. You used to draft a little car. Now it feels like you're drafting with a tractor-trailer truck. So I expect you're going to see big runs for sure.
Yeah, I think the big runs you're talking about, I think that's going to happen. I think those two races are going to be, or those three races rather, they're going to be a bit intense. I think they're going to be wilder than what we've already seen.
All right, this is the one that I really liked that was sent in from Connie. Steve, I'm going to throw this to you first because it is a little bit technical, but maybe you can break it down in a way that kind of makes sense to everyone. Connie admits, and I think a lot of us are thinking the same thing, still not sure of the difference between restrictor plates and tapered spacers. Let's just deal with the first part of that question for now. Thanks, Connie, for sending that in. But this is a good one, Steve.
So, Carolyn, they basically do the same thing, which is they go underneath the throttle body or the carburetor, basically, where the air goes into the engine, and they restrict the amount of air. The restrictor plate's real simple. It's just a piece of steel. It's not very big, and it has 4 holes punched in it. The piece of steel is only like an 1/8 inch thick, basically like 4 or 5 credit cards. The tapered spacer is like an inch thick, like a good, maybe, steak. And the ability of that tapered spacer is it's less sensitive to change, being I'm talking a scratch on a restrictor plate can change horsepower dramatically. When you start to take that same idea and you make it a 1 inch thick piece of aluminum, much less sensitive to machining issues or things like that. NASCAR just finding a better way to do it. The drivers seem to be a little bit more popular with the tapered spacer. So basically the same effect, less horsepower, just a little bit more consistent way to do it.
All right, and another look at the 2019 rules package as well, if you're still trying to get a handle on this thing. Jeff and Steve, the biggest takeaway here, though, is that the goal ultimately is better racing.
That's absolutely right, Carolyn. The goal is better racing, and it's going to be, you got to slow the cars down somehow for corner entry. They did that with horsepower and with drag, and they want the cars basically to race with one another. That's the downforce in the other half of the aerodynamics. There's a lot of details. The simple fact is everybody should wait and kind of give them the old eye test. If it looks better to you, then I call it better racing.
I think that's what a lot of fans sent in as well. You can continue to send us your questions. Use the hashtag NASCAR America. But I remember one on my Twitter feed saying, hey, listen, if it looks good, I'm all for it. And we hope that you guys are too.